First of all, nothing like a bunch of alcoholics trying to get some technical stuff together. We have it in our group almost every week. Something happens. Oh my gosh, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really ready for this COVID thing to be over. Um, so I'm coming from Dallas, Texas. I just, and I'm really glad that you guys do introductions before, so I can see. It's really cool to know if there's someone in here. I call them AA virgins. It's like never been to an AA meeting, doesn't know anything about AA, and doesn't know anything um, about the book. So I am a big book person. Like my sobriety date is June 2nd of '07, and I spent about 4.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous doing the worst drinking that I've ever done in my life. So, so first of all, I want to go back to page 44 before I even get started with my story. And so thank you guys for clearing up. I didn't know if it was an hour or 50 minutes. That's perfect. There's a bunch of stuff in my story that has nothing to do with my alcoholism. Alcoholism is very simple. It's two parts, it's mind and body. And so I'm going to get into that in a second. But there's a lot of my story, um, especially like Michael. I have a 25-year-old son. It's so weird to hear chairing a meeting. I'm thinking of my own son chairing a meeting. And anyway, it's just crazy to see. Um, anyway, so that's awesome that you're 25 and that's really cool. Cool to be of service and asset to your community. But anyway, so there's a lot of stuff in my story that doesn't necessarily have to do with my alcoholism. There are consequences that got me willing. So I always like to go to page 44. I always want to qualify myself as an alcoholic. And this is what being an alcoholic truly means here. So all the other stuff is just kind of periphery stuff that got me willing and teachable. Vodka did that. But on page 44, in the middle of the page in the big book, it says, um, very first paragraph, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Have I ever made the decision that I was never going to drink again? And I meant it. Like I could have passed the lie detector test. I said, I am never going to drink again. Um, and I meant it. Like I said, I meant it. I didn't wake up one morning and say, today's the day I'm going to kill my kids. I mean, I literally meant that I was never going to do it again, and my husband would turn over and say, don't you love them? The magic words for a mom with our kids. And it was shameful. It was horrible. And I literally said, I'm never going to, alcohol is not more important than my children or my family. And I meant it. So have you ever said you're going to, cannot quit entirely? Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. So the first one's the mind part, the obsession. And the second part that they're talking about in 44 is this allergy, this body part. I'm going to get into more specific detail in a second, but I always thought that when drinking have little control over the amount you take meant how much I drank or what I drank, or if I drank by myself or drank in the morning. I don't know about you guys, but I would take a ton of those online questionnaires, to see if you were alcoholic. And I literally would go to the next questionnaire if I got all the wrong answers. So this thing is very simple. I have a mind that cannot stay away from this first drink. No matter, I have no choice, but I have a body that tells me that I can continue to drink. And like I said, I'm going to get into that in just a second. So all the other stuff, whether it's divorce or 4 children or a horrible childhood, all that stuff was literally the things that got me willing to look at all of the stuff that we're going to talk about in step one. Um, the other thing too that, and I know that I'm going to talk about this at the very end, all of this just crap that I did and all of the things that caused such shame, the behavior was really never about me anyway. All of those experiences that God gave me, and I really feel like they were God given, was so I could go out there and help more and more women. Look, if I didn't have all of those experiences of being a real alcoholic, I would just be a blonde chick up here trying to sell you on some steps. But because I am a real alcoholic, I'm a drunk, like, textbook, which you're gonna see in a second, there's a trust there. There's a trust. It's not like how well I know the big book or the steps, it's my experience. And yes, I have had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. And I love that I've had, and I can help other women because of that. But the thing that helps me, my greatest asset, and this is why I'm so grateful to be a recovered alcoholic, is because of all the crap that I did. Now I can put it to good use. Now I can show my family. I can literally be the person that God's always meant for me to be. And I can take the crap and I can put that into something that's going to help my fellow human beings that come to me, and ask for help. I'm the only the vessel. It's not me. Um, but I want to talk about. I really want to talk about how I first got into AA, and especially since there's several newcomers, is the newcomer meeting, which is my favorite meeting. Um, I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous via a therapist. I lied to this therapist. I was having a horrible drinking episodes, and it started it probably started in my late 20s, my 20s, my early 20s, and going to college. I finished college. It was great. It was successful. I wouldn't say I was the best person to go out and have a drink with, but I certainly wasn't drinking alcoholically at that point. There's a lot of different ways to get to alcoholism. My sponsor drank alcoholically from day one. I did not. It took me a bit to get there. I got sober at 44. So throughout my 20s and my 30s, I started drinking, as it talks about in the book. It's a progressive illness. So I started drinking more and more and more. And so, where my friends after college started having children, they started pulling back, they didn't party as much. I, on the other hand, kept drinking more and more and more. And it didn't matter if things were good, it didn't matter if things were bad. It literally, if it were Tuesday and margaritas were half price, I'm there. So it wasn't like I had a big traumatic episode that caused me to cross over the line of alcoholism. It talks about in the book that we're usually the last ones to know or the last ones to spot it, when we cross over that the abyss. And so when I really started seeing that I was drinking problematically, um, I went through a lot of different things. And it's so cool because I'm literally textbook alcoholic. Like, I went through I'm not going to drink during the week, right? I'm just going to drink on the weekends. Um, my big thing was, my husband said, if you quit for 6 months, I'll quit for 6 months. Well, you know what happened? I don't know about you. Well, he quit for 6 months and I didn't. That's when I started really drinking by myself, hiding crap in the closets. I mean, a very legal substance, and I'm hiding it all over the house. Um, and that's really when I started drinking, and it really and I was justifying it because I needed it, or whatever our brains tell us that we need the alcohol. But I literally started drinking by myself at that point. It started getting worse. I kind of started scaring myself. And at that point, I'm going to fast forward because I want to kind of get into what happened. But at that point, I literally said, you know what? I have got to stop this. So I went to my doctor, first thing I did, because I started having suicidal thoughts. It was like I couldn't drink and I could not drink. And I don't want to emphasize all of the drunkalog stuff that went on, because there's a lot of crap that went on. We all have stories, or we wouldn't be here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never met anyone that just said, oh, I decided to quit drinking today, so I went to AA. It's usually cool, shit ton of crap that gets us here. And so I went to this therapist. I had thoughts of look, I thought my kids would be a better mom without me. I have 4 boys, aged 20 to 27. And my oldest was 13 when I got sober. It was 14 years ago. And so I really feel like that at that point in my life, um, I was out of options. I tried to stop on my own and I could not do it. didn't know much about Alcoholics Anonymous, but I went to my doctor. She sent me to this therapist, and this therapist started asking me these questions about how much I drank. Nobody had ever asked me questions like that. And it turned out saved my life. And it's always a God thing for me, but for all of us. This man was an old timer in AA, had like 35 years sober, and I didn't know it. And he didn't tell me until after he started asking me about how much I drank. And I don't know if we just sniff each other out. I don't know how in the hell this guy knew. Um, but there's like this intuition, he kind of knew. I lied to him, obviously, but he gave me this card of this meeting that was really close to my house. And he said, if you ever think that you want to stop drinking for good and all, I want you to try and go to this meeting and see what you think. Well, I took the card and I thought, you know what? I'm not ever going to do that. Um, well, fast forward 2 months later, as we always do, I woke up that one morning after a horrible, there was a million, I could write a book on, we could all write a book on all the crap we did with my kids, but it was a car wreck and my kids were in the car and it was horrible. I woke up the next morning and there are two things I always told my husband. One, I'm never going to do that again, ever. And today's the day that I'll go to a meeting. I never did do that until this moment in time. So I went to this meeting and I got all dressed up. I don't know about you guys, but I thought, if I look good, if I take a shower and go and dress up to this AA meeting, then maybe they won't think I'm such a bad person or a bad alcoholic. I didn't know what to expect, but I get all dressed up and go to this AA meeting. And this guy gives me this book and he calls it a blue book, and I never opened it. I sat in this meeting for almost 4 years, you guys. I got 24 desire chips. I kept going back, and they really kind of didn't know what to do with me in this group. I had a sponsor. I tried to do some step work. She really kind of didn't really know how to do the steps out of the book. Now, this is my experience. I mean, it's just my experience in my first AA meeting. And that's why I'm passionate about talking about the book and making sure that every newcomer hears about step one. Any meeting they go to, it's almost like I'm going to talk about page 24. And so I get to this meeting, I stay in this group, and you guys, I was dying. If I thought I was bad the month before I went into this to this situation, and it got worse. And when I tell you it got worse, it got worse. The people were telling me just to turn it over, just to get on my knees and turn it over. They would turn me to the third step prayer and just say the third step prayer. But I didn't go through the book. I didn't do the steps. And I don't know if it was just me in that moment, in those couple of years that I was really trying to do the work, or if I just was stubborn and just didn't listen. I don't know, but it really doesn't matter. At one point, about 2.5, 3 years into it, I decided to quit going. I thought, you know what? If I'm going to drink and get drunk, I might as well try something different. So I did that. I started going to church more. I joined a small group. I went to this yoga place and tried to do this called Excel, and it was just yoga. I tried pharmaceuticals. I went to this doctor who could give you all these different pills, to cut the craving. I don't. We've all been probably heard about all that. Anyway, it none of it worked, and it got to the point. Like I said, you always think, "Oh, I've hit bottom." For me, there's no bottom. It always gets worse. I went and I thought that wine was the problem. I started drinking vodka and I never looked back. I don't know who drinks a little glass of vodka, but I don't use glasses. I just drink it right out of the bottle, and it got really bad. It got so bad. I mean, I lost all the weight. I couldn't eat. Um, and I thought that I didn't have a way out. And one night I tried to drink myself to death. And I got this bottle and my kids found me with my best friend and my husband. I woke up in the hospital and I'm sitting there with all these tubes, right? And my husband said, you're going to rehab. And we found this place. It's in this central part of Texas, and it's a 30-day place, and you're going to go away. And you guys, I didn't care. I was so desperate and so dead inside. I really didn't care. I almost didn't care if I lived or died. All I wanted to do was just continue to drink. I get down to this place, and there's a story. There's a part of the story. It's why I'm telling you guys this. But I get down to this place, and it's beautiful hill country in Texas. And I walk into this big room. It's called like this bodega place, and there's steps on the wall. And I thought, oh my God, here we go again. These don't work for me. I've tried the steps. I did them on my own. I had a sponsor. I changed sponsors. I had this grand sponsor. There were three lineages of women trying to help me at one point, and I thought it doesn't work. It was 4:30 on a Monday afternoon, and I remember sitting there, and this guy, he had a patch on his eye. He was kind of a cranky guy, and he stood up in front of the room and he said, "Do we have any newcomers here? Does there anybody who would like to introduce himself?" There was like 90 people in this big room. And I raised my hand and I stood up, and I started crying. Oh, I drank and I almost died, and my kids found me, all the sob story stuff, that we do for attention seeking stuff. And the guy looked at me and he goes, "You need to shut up and sit down." And he goes, "I was just asking if there were newcomers here. I don't need to know your story. I just want to know if you're alcoholic or drug addict, why you were here." And I thought, you know what? That guy is a jerk. I can't cuss here. I cuss a lot, but I was like, I'm paying his salary and he's being a douchebag. So I marched right into his office. Um Afterwards, I can't believe I did this. It's so like such a freaking newcomer thing. And said, "Don't ever talk to me that way again. I'm here. You serve me, right?" And that guy said, "You know what, Lisa? If you will be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, this big book study, I'm going to talk to you about step one. And I need for you just to listen. And if you will listen just for 1 week, you might learn something about alcoholism because you don't know crap about alcoholism." And that pissed me off and gave me just enough of a challenge to go and listen to this guy. You guys, I went and listened to this man. It was 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, and it makes me cry still talking about it 14 years later. I heard step one in a way that I had never heard before. I always thought it was a behavior problem. I didn't understand that it was a disease, that I have a mental illness, that I have no choice over the first drink, and I have no control over any of the drinks I have after the first one. And I don't know if maybe someone had talked about the choice and control or allergy and the obsession and all those AA meetings I went to, but I tell you what, I never heard it. And the way that he described step one, he went right to the forward to the first edition. He talked about it was a body and the mind. And he literally, right out of the book on page 13, he started out and he knew I was there. So he knew I was a newcomer. Gonna give it 1 week and then leave. I mean, I don't know about you guys if you've ever been to any kind of rehab situation. I work at a women's recovery center here in Dallas. Um, and so I work with newcomers every single day, and it's huge. And it's only 14 days, but we're all big book. And so whenever we have a newcomer that comes into the room, everything changes to talk about step one, in a hopeful way. And he talked about this forward to the first edition. And he literally said, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." And he talked about the word recovered in a way that I'd always heard recovery. And he talked about recovered in a very different way. Like past tense. Like I'm not cured of alcoholism ever because I've got a body that will always be allergic to it, but I am recovered. I am not bulletproof. I can still drink, obviously, but I am in remission. I am not walking around one day at a time, hoping that today is not the day that something happens where I drink. I am recovered. I am free. And he talked about it in a way that was so attractive. It was attractive. I wanted what this man had. And he also talked about how it has to be so hopeless, right? Like stage 4 alcoholism is the best diagnosis that I can get. It is literally the best. I don't want a disco drunk at stage 2 that, oh, I don't know if I'm just gonna do that. No, I want someone who's completely how it seems like life and death, I am going to die. Because the worse off you are, the bigger your light shines, the more hope I have because I'm going to put just as much of effort into my recovery that I did to my drinking. And it was a lot of effort. So, my God, I should be recovered for the rest of my life. But anyway, so this guy talked about how it's a hopeless state of mind and body. He then goes to page 28 in Roman numerals in the doctor's opinion, and he literally breaks down this allergy. Like, the body part. And it's not about how much I drank or what I drank. Um, it's literally that when I start drinking, and he asked this, can you stop abruptly? I don't care what it is, if it's green NyQuil or if it's Grey Goose vodka, it doesn't matter. Um, and he also said, doesn't matter if you're drinking alone, doesn't matter the quantity. I don't care if you're drinking 3 bottles of wine or if you're drinking 2 glasses of vodka. The bottom line is, can you drink all day or start drinking, stop at 9:30 at night, switch to water and go to bed? Can you stop abruptly and do it not just more than once? The big book has this allergy test. In the middle of the book, it's right after Jim's story on 31 that really talks about how go to a bar. You're going to need to drink to see if you can pass this allergy test. And you guys, I had tried. The cool thing about this body part is that I always thought that when I was drink 3 or 4, that I was just changing my mind for drink 4 or 5. And what he was saying, and what the big book says, is I'm not changing my mind. Once I have the first drink, my body takes over. You can chop my head off and throw it down the road because it's a physical thing. It's like I am allergic to alcohol, like I'm allergic to penicillin. Once I put penicillin in my body, I can't reverse the effect of my throat closing up and dying. When I put alcohol in my body, I cannot reverse the effect of this craving. And these are words, you guys, and like I said, I'm maybe I'm just a dumbass, I don't know, but I didn't hear him the first time around, and I was mesmerized by this guy. And he said, "You know what? On page 20," and he started talking about this body. He said, "You know, um, the body is the problem with the body is that it gets worse. Like, are your relapses getting better and better, or are they getting worse and worse? Are they getting closer together?" And like, they're getting closer together and they're getting a lot worse. And he goes, "I don't want to hear your story. I want you to listen. I just need for you to listen." And then he started talking about the mind. And he said, "You know what? The body is not where you're screwed. It's your mind. And I'll tell you why." And he said, "The main problem of the alcoholic centers in her mind rather than her body." And it's like this for me. Like, I don't walk on a highway like Central Expressway, what we have here, a huge interstate with cars going 80 miles an hour because I die. My mind protects me. It's a like an intuition. I'm not going to go. It's an instinct to go. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to run out from a bunch of cars. My mind protects me. I'm not going to put my hand on a hot stove 100 times in a row, hoping my hand, that right hand, the left hand, or my thumb or my elbow. I'm not going to do that because once I do it, my mind remembers the consequences and it won't allow me to continue to do that unless something's wrong. But there's nothing, I'm not crazy. I'm not a loser. I don't. It's not that I don't remember the consequences, it's just that they don't come up in my head with enough force to stop me from taking the first drink. And then my mind, what protects me from walking out in front of all those cars going 80 miles an hour, when my mind tells me it's a good idea, I believe it. I believe it. My first drink never came to me as, oh my God, don't do it. Oh my God. My first drink always came to me as a really good idea. I told them I wasn't an alcoholic. I've been sober for 3 days. Whatever, 3 weeks, whatever. And the cool thing when he was sitting up there talking, um, I can literally transport myself back to that moment when he said, "You're going to die from this. Alcoholism is deadly." And I knew I was going to die. I almost did. I knew that it even had nothing to do with my physical body dying. I was dead years ago on the inside. This black hole that I had was a lot worse than physically dying because I was walking around wanting to die and literally couldn't because I felt so guilty about my children. And when he stood up there and said that there's hope. And he literally followed up page 24, which is the holy grail of step one. And it's the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. I can never say I'm not going to have another drink and not drink and keep that. I can't say I'm going to do that and keep that choice forever. I can stop one day at a time. I did it for years, but this is for good and all. I couldn't do it. Our so called willpower becomes practically non existent, and we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory, suffering, humiliation of even a week or a month ago. You guys, I'm without defense against the first drink. It's not like I didn't remember. I remember those car wrecks. I remember drinking and blacking out and driving my children all over and risking their lives every day. I would wake up and remember. It's just that it did not. After 4 or 5 days, I'm a jail girl. I went to jail a lot. Jail sucks. And I would remember jail, and that would keep me sober for 4 or 5 days. The other thing too about this humiliation and the suffering, it wasn't humiliation for taking my clothes off at a baseball game or some dumb thing I did. The humiliation and suffering was that I lied to myself one more time. And I had to wake up the next morning and look at myself in the mirror and say, I don't know what to do. And I tell you what, that is true hopelessness. And so when that man stood up there and said that, um, I knew I was an alcoholic. I almost let it's almost like I sat there and went, "Are you shitting me? I am an alcoholic after all these years of trying to turn up. I'm and I tell you what, it got my attention and it got my interest because in the next sentence he said, "Now I'm going to tell you about step 2 because there's a solution." And good for you and good for me that there's a 100% remission rate with alcoholism because of this book, because of this fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. And rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. And I tell you what, it was the first time in my life, and it was almost like this moment in my head that it literally exploded, where I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I was doomed, but I was hopeful. And he took me through, he didn't take me through the steps, but he explained them to me because he would not, of course, I'm going to get a woman sponsor, but it was the coolest moment um, of my life. And the reason I wanted to bring that up so much here is because of the newcomer. I hated AA. I thought AA was a cult. I thought it was weird. I thought you guys really like you want me to sit in front of this chick I just met 2 weeks ago and tell her my life story? No. You know what got me teachable? Vodka. Alcohol is a great persuader. It got me teachable. It got me humble. I was so arrogant, thinking that I knew what living on a spiritual basis was going to look like. And literally, that was my step two. And I do step two. I mean, literally, I did it one time, but step two, the principles of step two that I don't know, but I hope I still use almost every day because when I think I know something, I'm in big trouble. I'm in self reliance, not God reliance. So, step two is crucial because what he said was it's not about God. The step two is not about God, it's about willingness. And there's a whole chapter called We Agnostics about prejudging, about what I thought I knew, and I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of things. And it started to open this door of light in my life that I had not had in a very decades. Because I thought that it was about you guys are trying to get me to Jesus or something. I didn't know. I just I did I thought it was a religious thing. And when he started talking about step two in a way that was very different, that it was about the willingness to believe, that it was my own conception or whatever higher power, I could believe my own conception. But step two, that was going to come a little bit later. But step two was literally about willingness and me being arrogant and thinking that I knew what living on a spiritual basis was going to look like. And I didn't want any part of it. And I started to, it was kind of a precursor to step four, actually. But I started to see how arrogant and how that had been blocking me from any kind of spiritual awakening or any kind of spiritual journey that I was ever going to go on. Um, and I love step three when it talks about it's so simple. The question is so simple. It takes 2 seconds. There's no month. We don't need a long time on step two. It literally says, do I now believe on 47, or am I even willing to believe that there's a power out there greater than myself? And as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. That was my step two. And it was really cool. And it was really short. And it really, I didn't have a year or months to go through these steps. Why would I want to postpone the joy of watching another woman's lights come on? I want to get out there and do that immediately, as soon as I can. Thank God Bill W. and Dr. Bob didn't wait a year before they started sponsoring people, or none of us would be sitting here right now. And the other thing, too, is I didn't have enough time to wait. I knew a week or a month I was going to be drunk again. There is no doubt. That was my pattern of behavior over a 10-year period. So I needed to get after it. And my sponsor took me through the steps when I got home. I was through the steps in 3 weeks. And it worked for me. And I'm so grateful that that happened. And I'm grateful that the woman that took me through the steps didn't want to waste any time to get me through this because I have a lifetime of learning. Um, because I tell you what, the end result is not sobriety. Sobriety is not the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous. I almost wish we could take alcohol out of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what gets me in the door. But getting sober is day one. It's recovery is a journey. Sobriety is a moment. I am going to be recovered. That's what's so interesting about it to me. If it was just about me staying sober, that's not that interesting. I can stay sober. Recovery is a whole new life. It's like a life's journey of learning and constantly helping other women to get to the place. It's so different. I sold myself short when I walked in the door of AA thinking it was just about getting sober. Recovery is very different than sobriety. And it's a lot more interesting because my own sobriety cannot sustain my recovery. I need your sobriety, or at least me trying to continue that. The third step was a life changer for me because I thought I was going to turn it over in step three. And that had been my problem for years, and I didn't understand. And my sponsor looked at me and said, "If you knew how to turn it over in step 3, why would you need step 4?" Literally, the decision you're making in step 3, Lisa, and it talks about in the book, and I don't have time to get into all of it, but it talks about it in the book in Fred's story on page 25 that, look, to be doomed to an alcoholic death, which is step 1, or to live on a spiritual basis. Now, did I want to live on a spiritual basis? No, it was pointed out to me that this is not a feelings program, that it's an action program. And so literally my third step was I was making a decision between dying in step 1 and living in step 2. I was given hope. So literally my third step decision was I wanted to learn how to live on a spiritual basis with the help of this book, with my sponsor, and that was my decision. I wanted to learn how to turn it over. I wanted to learn how to live on a spiritual basis. And that's what steps 4 through 12 are all about. That's what they taught me. That's when I got down to pen and paper and I started taking action. There's no action in step 3. Step 3, I got down on my knees. I did the third step prayer. I held hands with this chick I just met a week ago, which is weird. Uh, and it changed my life. And I tell you, I was the biggest skeptic. I didn't think it would work. I didn't even know if I wanted it to work because I was so miserable. But I gave it a chance, and it opened the door to a life that I can't even imagine. Um, I've got my 21-year-old son is an addict, and he celebrated a year in May of last year, celebrates 2 years in May. And one of the things that is so cool about it, you guys, is that he said to me at lunch one day, took me to lunch, and a couple of things. He said, "Mom, if you can do it, I can do it. And the other thing is, you make sobriety, you make recovery look fun. It's attraction rather than promotion." And I made a deal with God that day on my knees that I would spend the rest of my life, hopefully, being grateful to be a recovered alcoholic. And the other thing that he said, which I think is so interesting about young people these days, and my kid, is that he said, it's going to be hard turning 21 and in recovery. And I don't know, Mom. I'm sad about that. And this is all God because it's not me because I'm not that smart. But I'm sitting there in that restaurant. I looked at him and I said, "You know what? You're right. I can't imagine my 20s in recovery because I had a crap ton of fun. I did. I did. But you know what? I missed the first 7 years of his life. I was drunk the whole time." And I said, "Son, the one thing that I know for sure is that you may not get 21 to drink on that day with your friends, but what you will do is you will get to be there for your children. You will get to be there every day and remember every kind of milestone that they go through. And that's huge. There's trade offs for all of this." And I tell you what, I had never been more grateful to be an alcoholic than sitting there in front of my son. Because yes, I love sponsoring women. Don't get me wrong. I sponsor like a mother because it's literally to watch a woman's lights come on after they're dead and to have a little girl come up to me and say, "Thank you for helping my mom." There is no glass of wine that ever gave me that high, ever. But to be able to help my son, not just help him with words, but help him with action because he has watched me for years put my family second and my recovery first. And it makes sense now. It makes sense. I have to put recovery is where I found God. Recovery is where I found my faith. And I think all those years ago when my kids were asking me not to go to that meeting, that weird quitters meeting that you go to, now I think they understand. So not only was my alcoholism and the crap that went along with it a ripple effect, like it was horrible, My recovery is too. My recovery affects my life and my family's life and the women more than I could have ever imagined. So just planting the seed and that one man up there who had no idea, he was so rude that day and told me to shut up and sit down, was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. You never know when that one time a newcomer is going to hear something that they need to hear out of that big book, and it will change someone's life. And um, that is my story. And I think it's 6:50. I'm gonna cry. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Hey, Lisa, I just wanted to let you know if you wanted to share about anything else, we
Mhm.
go to 8 o'clock and then we go to
Oh, okay,
8:15 Q&A. If you'd like
gotcha.
to
I can do
share
that.
anything. Okay.
I do. No, go ahead. I can, but I can talk. You have no idea. I can talk forever. Um, One of the coolest things I think too about 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 Zoom and about all this virtual stuff, I get a lot of women who call about, I'm so afraid I'm going to drink. I'm so afraid I'm going to drink, because of COVID and lack of community. I mean, we're all sitting on a two-legged stool because we don't have the third, part of the triangle, unity. Um, but that's exactly what we're supposed to be building our foundation for. There's such a big difference between, for me, it's my opinion, because this is not in the book. Obviously, you can throw it away if you don't like it. Such a big difference between sobriety and recovery. And if I'm walking around afraid that I'm going to drink, there is something wrong with my recovery, because the 10-step promises are real. They're real. And if I'm not experiencing the 10-step promises, then, and this woman was like, oh, I'm afraid. Okay, go out and help somebody. Go find an alcoholic to work with, because they're out there, whether it's a virtual meeting or a church, reach out to any kind of hospital. They're out there, and the problem is, if I'm worried about drinking, I'm thinking about me. I'm not thinking about all the other people out there who are suffering in alcoholism. I'm still worried about me, and it's selfish and self-centered. And the other thing too is that I can't walk around for the rest of my life walking on eggshells, hoping that something doesn't happen that's going to cause me to drinking. I am in charge of my own destiny. I can own my own stuff. I can own my own inventory. And you can't make me drink. You can't force me to drink. You can't disturb me enough where I'm going to drink. And that's the freedom of recovery. Um, and that's one of the things that's such a huge principle difference, I think, from just trying to be sober every day, because you got to do everything perfect if you're just trying to be sober. That me in recovery, I can screw up a lot. I mean, actually, I'm inspired by women who do this imperfectly. I don't want anyone who's perfect. Imperfection is. And so I can be imperfect and stay recovered. I have to be perfect if I'm just trying to stay sober. Make sure my fourth step is right. Make sure my fifth step is right. Make sure, oh my gosh, everything's got it. It doesn't. Thank God it's progress and not perfection. And that's one of the beautiful things about this pandemic for me, is it's allowed me to get closer to God in a way that I would have never ever thought before. Um, and the other thing too, I get a lot of phone calls about, I don't feel connected. I don't feel connected. I feel disconnected in this. Um, and I had a great conversation with my sponsor the other day, and we were talking about that. Um, and the thing about connection is that my job is 10, 11, and 12. I am not the arbiter of how connected I am. Maybe that's exactly where God wants me right now, is to feel like I need to seek him or her out even more, you know? And I love those two questions. One, I think I'm going to drink today, or I don't feel connected. Because literally, if you're worried about drinking, then that's not Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a byproduct. Not drinking is a byproduct of a spiritual awakening, right? But my motive should be to go out there and help other women after I've had a spiritual awakening. Now, when I'm trying to get sober, and do the steps, that's totally different. But now that's my job, is to go out and find, and I don't need to double down on my spiritual fitness, you know? Um, but I love how my sponsor was like, you know what? It's not about how connected you are, how you feel. It's an action program. It's 10. That's the relapse prevention program, right? Is 10, 11, and 12. And the book tells us we're doing that to the best of our abilities, just like it's outlined. That rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Um, and I love that right now because it's hard right now. I can't imagine trying to get sober right now in the middle of this pandemic, because community and fellowship is so important, or at least it was for me when I was trying to get sober in the beginning. I mean, steps 8 and 9, going out and making amends, my sponsor made me do it face to face. It wasn't like I could just do it on a Zoom call, or text, or I had to go out face to face. And it changed my life because I was able to do that. Um, and again, I didn't want to make any of the amends, especially in the beginning. But the more amends I made, the more I went through the process after my fifth step of um, seeing how it wasn't as bad. I thought I knew what the outcome was going to be, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And the more that I did them, um, the more at peace I became. Um, and it also helped me to go make amends now when I screw up, because I screw up a lot. It's a part of the 10 steps. So we as a fellowship and as a group of Alcoholics Anonymous are constantly making mistakes. And I really feel like making mistakes is the only time I'm not going to get on my knees 24/7 if I'm not in pain. And usually pain is an outcome of a huge mistake I make. So I'm not even afraid of that anymore. Um, and it's really been a cool journey. Um, the other thing that's happened too, that's been incredibly cool because of this pandemic, is the way that we've been able to help a lot more women in Dallas virtually. Our business has gone internationally because of Zoom calls, and like being here tonight with you guys. I'd probably just be going, I don't know, going and getting ice cream with my husband tonight. But instead I get to be with you guys and get to share this journey. And I would not have been able to do that had it not been for this pandemic. So even in a pandemic, God has asked us, and the book talks about being in gratitude no matter what. And I tell you what, gratitude's an action. It's not a feeling, because I've got to get down on my knees and ask God for the gratitude, because I'm human and I like Lisa reliance and not God reliance. Um, I think that's all. Is that good?